Okay, so we're in class 40 of Torah coaching, or faith and confidence, and you can see all the classes on patreon.com/mgenuth. Okay.
Can you repeat that?
It's okay. You don't need. You get it. You get it in the WhatsApp group.
Here's a.
Okay. So last time we finished the topic. Hopefully, I hope we finished it. About that there's a type of confidence that is meant to create leadership, and that the point is not to continue the line that we already have, but to start something new. And so the true leader, like Joseph, he's not on purpose. He doesn't depend on continuing the line, as it were, with natural methods. He wants on purpose there to be like a new beginning. And that this new beginning, even if he only uses it once, but it sets the tone that everything that's being done is being done with such divine help that it goes against nature. That's true Jewish leadership. Because by definition, if you want Jews to be like everybody else, so then of course what they have to do is they have to fit into the world. And when you fit into the world, that's the regular line that we pursue. That by natural methods we want to achieve our ends. But the whole purpose of Abraham setting up the Jewish people was to reveal that there's something above nature. And not just something, that the whole source of the world, and really everything in the world, is just God. And so nature is just a means that we use right now. But we're not limited by it. So at some level, the Jewish leadership has to reveal what's above nature. It can't just leave it to be natural. The highest type of miracle is the type of miracle that when it happens, it doesn't go against nature, meaning it doesn't destroy nature, it fits into nature, but everybody who looks at it says, this was unnatural. How did this happen? It can't happen. So we're now looking for something that is above and beyond the natural in the sense that it contradicts nature. It can fit into nature, but the chances for this to happen, let's say that's the way you would describe it today, you would say the chances of this happening are nothing. It could happen. It's not that it's never happened. Well, it hasn't never happened. But it's not that it can't happen, but it just doesn't happen.
What doesn't happen?
What hasn't ever happened?
This great revelation that nature is in the hands of God. That you're not working just by natural means. You're not
the splitting
doing.
of the sea. It only happened once.
Happened only once. And that's how you start. So Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't have to split the sea every day.
Yeah,
But the beginning has to be like that. Sorry.
It seems like there's the synchronicity, or whatever, is still way above nature. If you really.
What's above nature?
Life.
Good. No, it's not. But it's it's an everyday occurrence that people are alive.
No, I don't mean that. I mean the way things, like just.
Some people do notice.
Like finding a
miracles.
menorah, or somebody selling it from the Holocaust. Like all these the synchronicity is above
Okay,
nature.
okay.
So many things.
Okay, those are small things, but they don't have to do with the entire Jewish people. Here he's saying something that starts off, it's like an inception point that has to be detached from nature. And so what we learned last time was that Joseph couldn't depend, it was wrong for him as a leader to depend on the minister, on the butler, on Pharaoh's butler. Because Joseph has to do things in an unnatural way. They have to be supernatural. They have to be spectacular. Because what he's revealing is something else from the run-of-the-mill trust in Hashem. So this is called the trust that's higher. It's higher even than faith. Where faith, it just says there's only Hashem. But here it's saying that it is inevitable. Whatever reality is, faith is like there's no reality. The higher type of confidence, we said, is that within reality, it is inevitable that something great will appear. That's what happened to Joseph, and that's what happened to Moshe Rabbeinu in the end. That in the beginning we said he was afraid to come forward, and we talked all about his having to remove his shoes, that the shoes represent the enclothement in this world. He had to take that off in order to be able to start something new, in order to come to the higher form of confidence, to have higher trust in Hashem, that he could do something that by all accounts would be supernatural, would not be the regular way that things work. Okay? So there, those were descriptions. Those were descriptions in the Torah, in the Bible. And now we're coming to descriptions that are not from the Torah, but rather have to do with much more similar times to our own. Things that are far more similar to what we're accustomed to. Because you have to understand that in every generation, the way in this appears in the world is a little bit different. You have to have a sense for how it appears in each generation. In the generation of Joseph, the supernatural appeared in what way? Through dreams. All of the book of Genesis that we just finished is all about dreams. Everything that's guiding everybody is dreams. And so much so even, who's the first one to dream? It's not explicit, it's implicit, that he was dreaming. It was Adam. And when Hashem he made him fall asleep. So there was a great sage about 500 years ago. His name was Moshe David of Valley. He was a friend, and he started teaching him. Then he became his friend, his equal, of the Ramchal. And
what's his last name? Moshe David what?
the Ramad of Valley. That's how he's called. And they're both buried, apparently one next to another, just outside Venice in what's it called, Parma, I think Parma. I don't remember the name of the town. No, it's not Parma. No, Parma's like near where I grew up in Ohio. Something else. Anyway, so I don't remember the name of the town. So he writes something amazing. I think he's the first one who noticed this, that it doesn't say anywhere that Adam woke up.
Ever? Oh, that's funny.
He's still asleep.
It's like hold your breath. Oh, yeah.
He's still asleep and he's still dreaming. And all of reality is his dream. That's what he writes. So we don't take it that far. We just say that what guided him, what guided him is his sleep also, Taldema. But in Moshe Rabbeinu's generation, there were already different types of miracles. And by the Avos, it's very interesting. In the time of the patriarchs, there's no miracles. I don't know if you notice this. There's no miracles. They don't report any miracles. The only thing that's close to a miracle at all. No, that's a medrash. We don't know. No, I'm saying that the Chumash. Chumash doesn't talk about it. There's one thing that's like that sounds like a miracle. That can be that. It also describes there that it came back to her. That it describes that she became, that she she menstruated again. It's something like, it's not unheard of. It's rare, but it's not unheard of. There's one thing that we'll see today that might be a miracle. They were sick. There's nothing like the splitting of the Red Sea. There's nothing like the manna. There's none of these. There's nothing like the Miriam's well. Those things don't appear in Bereshis. There's one thing that looks like a miracle. It sounds like a miracle. It's very hard to understand it without a miracle. But again, it's completely enclosed in nature. And that is that Avram was able to conquer, to win a war against the four kings. That is almost that's hard to understand. But still, it's like the 6-day war, sort of. It's not completely outside the confines of nature. It could be. We don't know how many soldiers he has. It says he had 318. It could be that he added more.
Or just Eliezer.
So that's again the measures. But we don't. I'm saying what the pshat of the Chumash is. The pshat of the Chumash. It's interesting that Rashi brings that as to I don't know. Maybe he wants to tell us that the miracle was greater than we think it was. Not clear. Our times are a lot like the times of the patriarchs. That our miracles are not of the type that they had in the generation of the desert. That was a special generation, something that was different. They were the exception, not the rule. And the rule is more like in the time of the patriarchs. So in that sense, the way that the Torah develops is that once you finish the book of Genesis, you get into this very miraculous period of time, 40 years, where things are like not the way we understand them. And once you finish with Deuteronomy, you finish with Devarim, and you go to Joshua, so again things become normal. So there's a few miracles here and there, but it's not a completely miraculous existence anymore. There's still a little bit left over. The main thing being Joshua holding the sun back for 12 hours.
The wall's coming down.
And the wall is coming down. Okay, there's a few things that he does that are like Moshe Rabbeinu. He's continuing Moshe. But once that's gone, it's like everything becomes miraculous in the sense that you could fit it within nature. It's not impossible that this thing would happen naturally. So, by us, these things, these miracles are more like in the time of the patriarchs. And when the sages describe miracles, their miracles are also more similar to ours. And when they're not, it's a whole question about whether they're telling us a parable or whether they're describing something miraculous. There's a lot of discussion in the Rishonim about how to understand stories that the sages say that sound miraculous. But there's two examples of two stories that we'll look at today. We've looked at them before, so I'm just preparing you, but they are the example of what it means to be a true Jewish leader in the sense of going above just faith. And as we'll see, this is the most relevant teaching that we have for our times, and I think we've talked about this before. I don't think this is the first time you'll hear this, but from experience I know that even if I heard something once, it's always useful to hear it again. Okay, so basking, chisayon, in the shadow of faith, faith in God that we mentioned, is illustrated in Rabbi Akiva's well-known statement. It's really the shadow of faith here that we're talking about is that a person is in a state of what we described it above was that a person who can't, let me just quote it from here. It was one page back. A few pages back, actually. Lachasot. It was on page 67.
67 is one page back.
There's a lot of stuff in between. So what we explained there was that even though Moshe and Jacob fled, okay, and it seems that they didn't have confidence, they didn't have trust, because somebody would have trust would not flee. He would stick his ground, stay to his ground. Then we said that they had something called chisayon. They basked in the shadow of faith. And For them, for people like them, that's actually better than confidence. It's better than trust. And that's what it says, Tov lachasot ba'Hashem mibtoach ba'adam. It's better to bask in Hashem, meaning to take refuge in Hashem, than to have confidence in men. And we said why? Because they were meant to become leaders, so they can't use the regular type of confidence. They have to elevate to the higher type of confidence. But on the way, they have this state called faith, which is basking in the shadow of faith. That's what it was called. So now we're explaining what it means to bask in the shadow of faith. That we, in our generations, will see, we're constantly basking in the shadow of faith. We're not with confidence. Remember, we spoke about this a few times. That once there's a return to the land of Israel, so the land of Israel is more about confidence. It's more about trust. But the whole state of being in exile is being in a state of faith. Okay, that's the main point. That when in exile you can't exercise confidence. If you try, and there were people who tried, then it doesn't work so well.
What did you start to say about Rabbi Akiva? Is he one of those?
Rabbi Akiva, he's the beginning, he's the generation that began the exile. He saw the destruction of the Second Temple, and he, in a very seminal tale, a very seminal story that happened to him in the time of the Romans, he set up the whole situation for us when in exile, about how to be with faith and not with confidence. Okay?
But that's not good, is it? It was good then.
What do you mean? It's still good. It's still the norm.
The norm, but wouldn't it be
As
better?
there is a return to the land of Israel more and more, so there's more and more movement. Like the Baal Shem Tov, his whole thing was to restore the Jewish people. That's what he worked on his whole life. So for him, it became more and more important to start talking about confidence, not just about faith. But as we'll see, there's no confidence without there being first faith. What does it mean to have faith? We still haven't seen this, but we've seen it many times. So we haven't said a particular verse about faith. The true faith is without blemish. If you believe that there's anything in the world except for Hashem, that means that your faith is blemished. If you believe there's anything else affecting your life except for God, running your life, affecting you, then that's a blemished faith. The faith has to be ke'etzem hashamayim latoal. It has to be like a cloudless sky, without a single cloud in it, completely blue.
So
And
it's
that's
like
what-
ain't owed no bado.
Right. And that's the main thing that the Baal Shem Tov worked on. Clearly, if you ask anybody, what did the Baal Shem Tov do the most? It seems that more than anything, he cleaned out the faith. He made sure, he did all he could to remove all telltale signs of what we call superstitions. Now, was he successful or not is a different question, but if you follow his path, then that's what you aim to do. Once the sky is clean, it's purely blue. Why blue? Because it says that that's how a person sees has Yiras Shamayim, how he becomes sensitive to God. When you understand there's only God, then you become sensitive to God. We'll see in a moment the two things that are blue, and that they cause sensitivity to God, sensitivity to faith. So the Baal Shem Tov, first of all, worked on cleansing the faith, because over the 2,000 years in exile, we became full of superstitions. It's almost impossible not to. We're affected by all the nations around us. And even when we were living in the land of Israel, they were still affected. The whole story of the Bible is that they keep on believing in this thing called Baal. What is this Baal? It's a type of superstition it's called an Amorite religion. It was the religion of the entire Near East at that time. And Baal wasn't something specific. They always have problems defining exactly who is this Baal. Baal is just basically saying there are other forces out there. That's basically what it means. And so you worship these other forces. It was a general name, it was a generic name for idolatry. It's Baal this. Baal means the owner. He owns something. So somebody else owns you because this, because of that. So the Baal Shem Tov, the first thing he had to do before even talking about confidence, he had to cleanse the faith. And whoever followed him, so that was the main thing that they learned. That in the end there's only Hashem. And all the things that were superstition before are gone. And if you want to do anything special, you look in the Torah. And you play with the letters. Like today, unfortunately, the whole thing of Sgulos, from the Baal Shem Tov especially, was completely, I don't want to say completely, but by a lot of people it became a superstition in and of itself. Instead of, no, Baal Shem Tov did a lot of miracles. He did a lot of things that were very special. And to do them, he looked in the Torah for it. So then the people that came afterwards said, I don't know how to look in the Torah. I don't know how to do what the Baal Shem Tov did. So what will I do? I'll mimic what he did. And then there starts this whole tradition of trying to do what he did. Instead of understanding that what he set up mostly was he wanted every person, that's what the Mashiach told him, that he wanted every person to be able to look in the Torah. It doesn't matter how much you know. The moment that you look in with a belief that this is Hashem's light, this is Hashem's revelation in the world, and you're mechadish something, anything that you're mechadish, that is the skula. You don't need something special. People think that there's some kind of special thing, special ritual you need to do. It's nonsense. That's again, it became superstition again. It fell down into superstition. The whole point was that if you connected the Torah properly, directly to Hashem, and you're mechadish something, just say something new, even if it's just new to you. It doesn't matter if it's been said in a book. Of course, the power is greater if you're able to say something that was never said before, and it has to be correct, of course. That itself has the power of healing. It has the power of helping a woman give birth. Everything, and not only that, he taught that everything that a person does. There's a story about, I can't remember who it was. Maybe I'll remember now. I think it was the first Lelover. That somebody came to him and said there's a woman who's having trouble giving birth. You know, at that time it was almost it was very dangerous. It could be life and death. So he was just, when they came to him, he was in the middle of holding his tobacco box. And then he opened it and he said, just as I'm opening my tobacco box now to take a little pinch, so should her womb be opened. And she immediately gave birth. What was the idea? That a tzaddik like that, any pleasure that he takes from this world is sanctified. There's something special about it. So just the fact that he opened the box, it was enough. It already moved something. It didn't have to even to be something in Torah. It's just that he understands that everything is Hashem. And Hashem now opened this for me and gave it. It doesn't have to be here. That's the bitachon that we learned from Levi Yitzchak. That when he sat down to eat, he said, Hashem, give me my food, even though the food is right in front of him.
That's sushi.
Levi Yitzchak. That's what I remember. Maybe I'm wrong. So anyway, it goes back to this idea that you have to first cleanse the faith. Once the faith is cleansed and there's no more superstition in it, then you can begin to have confidence. That's the natural order. That's why we call it faith and confidence. And first cleanses the faith, there's only Hashem, then have confidence that Hashem helps you and does everything that you need Him to do the way you understand that it needs to be done.
So the superstition would must be like the straw you're holding on to, other than direct Hashem. Or no?
The straw, we said, is just trying to continue the line, trying to continue my path.
Superstition, like you said, take it away.
That's not a new line, that's only a old
That's
line.
just saying that we would prefer to continue doing what we do rather than start something new. And so we'll hang even onto a straw. And the straw is like a very weak line, very weak extension of what we're doing. But we prefer that to having to do something new, always. A person always prefers that. It's called hope.
Oh,
The hope that maybe just one more act in the direction that I'm going will tip the balance. I don't want to start something new. Because real confidence is when I start something new.
Right.
So now we said that there are leaders that they can't function this way. They can't function. They have to start something new from the beginning. So if Yosef would have depended, meaning if Yosef would have drawn a direct line from his actions in the prison to his becoming viceroy, then he wouldn't be a true leader. He would just be another extension of the past. But he couldn't start something new. And he was destined to start something new. Same thing with Moshe Rabbeinu. He has to be something new entirely. So to be something new, he can't, even in terms of his learning.
All the time,
No, just in the beginning.
just in the beginning.
And what was the beginning?
Moshe's beginning is...
No, Joseph's beginning.
In this case, it was that, who knows why, he's for 2 years is in prison, suddenly he's called to interpret the dream. But not because of his connection with the... It's not his act. He didn't make this happen. It has to start in some miraculous way. So the same thing by Moshe Rabbeinu. He has to start in some miraculous way. So we said that was called, that faith is called basking in the shadow of faith. That's what it's called. The same thing by the Jewish people. That's why at the beginning of the year we sit in the sukkah. We sit in the shadow of faith. Like that the year begins with something that has nothing to do with the past. You go out of your house and you start something new entirely. Ach bayom harishon, ach chilek. That's the language that the sages use. That the word ach says it's a new beginning entirely. And really the year begins on the first day of Sukkot. Yeah.
But it doesn't really start from him. It's like set up for him, and he has to take the right. Like
He doesn't know. He doesn't know entirely what. In faith, there is a state of okay, it's unknown. There's only Hashem. I don't know how the world is going to be born from this moment on. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. Okay, so in the time of the exile, there's little trust at all. There's only faith. But it's this faith where you're constantly starting something new. You don't know. It's a state of insecurity. That's what exile means. It says one of the curses is, or one of the descriptions of exile is Baboker tomar mi iten yom, Balayla tomar mi iten yom, Uvayom tomar mi iten erev. That at night you'll say, I hope I reach the morning. And in the morning you say, I hope I reach the evening. There's nothing is secure. There's no confidence in anything. So on the face of it, it sounds like it's a very terrible existence. It's really very bad. But why is it again? It's because it's a state of cleansing all the superstitions. All the superstitions have to. The faith has to become clean. So that's the thing that the Baal Shem Tov worked on the most. First of all, to cleanse, not even to believe in holy names. He didn't believe in holy names even. It's not that they're not true. If you study them as studying them, it's fine. But if you begin to believe that I'll say some holy name and because of that, this or that will happen to me, so you can turn Torah into superstition. Had a very tough conversation last night. It's hard to hear with somebody who suffers from all kinds of problems. And they said that thank God they met some Mekubal, and he told them that because your parents didn't do Chanukat Habayit in your house, so because of that it's full of ghosts or whatever. So about these things, you're between a rock and a hard place when you encounter this, because you don't want to say something bad about somebody that people at least respect, because it's supposed to be connected to Torah, to Hashem. I said to them, look, the only thing that you need to do to live in a house is to have mezuzot. And Chanukah Habayit is a very nice minhag, but it's only a minhag. Don't make it into that this is, and certainly don't think that. But that's people live in these superstitious worlds. The strongest, most powerful, I didn't have time to say it last night to this person, but the strongest, most powerful example I ever saw of this is by Rav Usher, that when he had a heart attack, he said, the Yetzer Hara is fighting me. What is it fighting me for? Whether I'll go to a doctor or not. And he didn't go. Whether he'll go to the hospital or not. He didn't go. He had many, many heart attacks. He went through all of them. So somebody else would have said, he should have been dead by the time he was 60 with all those heart attacks. He lived almost 90. He was 88, 87. Like any normal person would. For him, even something like that, to go to a doctor is superstition. Because he's so adamant there's only Hashem in the world. So this is not for everybody to cleanse their faith that much. But then you understand how he had such confidence. That whenever he needed money, it miraculously appeared. So many stories about how money appeared suddenly out of nowhere. Like basically out of thin air. Whatever he needed somebody to be well, whatever blessing he gave and so on. But it all depended, like the Baal Shem Tov, that he doesn't believe in anything except for Hashem. You can't sell him on anything.
So when he did meditations, he didn't use
Holy names?
holy names?
Again, when you learn a lot, so these things come to you when you're meditating Jewishly, because your mind is full of Torah. Could be even meditating on the name, but it's not a feeling that the name is what's helping me. It's Hashem.
But the name has to do with the proper kavanah.
Again, they don't. The Baal Shem Tov was against that.
Really?
Okay?
I thought that's what he did.
That was the whole
Right,
thing.
I thought that's what
No,
he
on
did
the
too.
contrary.
He used
That's
what?
that's
What did he use?
That's the seminal story about the Baal Shem Tov as a child. That when he was 7 or 8, he had learned by himself all kinds of holy names, and he wanted to try it out. So he went to a river, and he put his a piece of cloth on the water, and he said the holy name, and he used the piece of cloth like a what do you call it?
Raft.
Like a raft.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he grew up a little, he understood what a shtus he had done. And so he waited for the opportunity to do tshuva on that. What was the tshuva? The one time he was chased by bandits as I'll say in Russian, by muggers in the forest, and he ran away from them, and he came to a river, and he could have done the same thing. It worked when he was younger, but no, he crossed the river without anything but faith in Hashem. He said that was his rectification for using a name in that way. But that's not what you base your life
So
on.
what, he walked on the water?
Maybe he swam across.
It doesn't say.
Maybe he swam across. I don't know. The ones who make
You could have
who
stood on a
flourish.
cloth again.
What?
Could have stood on a cloth again.
Ken, the ones who want to make it into like Mamash Tshuvat HaMishkad, it's exactly one against the others. They say he took out a cloth again and he just went by the power of his pure faith. But it doesn't matter. The point is that he got across just
Wow.
Wait,
believing
he
in
went by
Hashem.
power of his faith. That was
Okay. Pure faith. Nothing else. Just faith. There's only...
Did he meditate on Hashem's name?
No, because the
No,
name
that's
is
the
already
point.
removed. That's the entire point. The name is... Even the name can become superstition.
Or Avodah Zarah?
What is there? I don't know, but it can become superstition that it's not really connecting to Hashem. What does superstition mean? It can be even what we call that there is a level above the faith. It's super, it's above it. Meaning it's concealing it. It's not letting you connect to Hashem Himself.
But
And we said everything we talked about faith by the Baal Shem Tov is to imagine there's nothing here except for Hashem. That's all. That's pure faith. So the stronger the purity of the faith, the greater the confidence that the person has when he actually comes to do something.
Well, you mentioned hope. Is that really important?
We said
here?
hope is when I hope to extend the line doing more of the same. I want to extend my mission. I want to do the next stage by just doing more of the same. But sometimes it doesn't work.
But it's not. That's not using it here with the.
No, hope is not related to faith. It said hope is a variety of confidence, of trust. Okay, so basking in the shadow of faith. Now I'm reading from the pages. Faith in God that we mentioned is illustrated in Rabbi Akiva's well-known statement. And again, it's a feeling, in a certain sense, of helplessness. There's no confidence, no security. But what I have to believe is that every time something happens, as we'll see, all that the lover does, what did he say, Rabbi Akiva? All that the lover is God. Hashem loves you. He does for the good. This statement is the general principle by which the Jewish people survived the long and arduous exile, as explained in Hasidic teachings. And this is the approach. This is how you make it through. Because there's there's not enough.
Here, take this one.
Because there's simply no rhyme or reason to what you're seeing. Like the exile is a state in which you have no trust in tomorrow. Everything can be turned upside down because the king decided, wherever you're living, in Spain or in Germany or in Poland or in Russia or wherever, or in Morocco or in Tunis or wherever, the king decided now that he wants some new mishagas from his Jews, and he does this and that. Or Stam, your neighbor, decided to come and kill you, and you have no protection. There's nothing. There's no security. It's a state of upheaval. So how do you get through a state of upheaval? Through faith. So if you meant by faith to stick with it, stick with the program, that's one thing. That's what most people mean when they say you should have faith that this is from Hashem. Most people, when they say Jews had faith, what do they mean? That we believe that one day this would end. Or we continue to believe in spite of the events. That's not what that means. That's also true. But here, in Hasidic teachings, to have such faith, you learn from Rabbi Akiva what it does. It does something. It also does something. We'll see in a second. But more importantly than it does something, it's how you approach it. What does it mean to have faith in exile? What does it mean to have faith in a situation that's constantly being turned over without any rhyme or reason? What do you do with that? We have to understand that the state we're in now is unnatural, even though we're at the end of exile, like the Rebbe said, this is the last generation of exile, first generation of redemption. But because we're still deep in the exile, so this still holds. And you have to have this, you have to learn this approach, and you have to understand what it does. So what happened? So the story is like this. Rabbi Akiva is quoted making this statement in illustration of the principle that we are obligated to bless God both for good and bad tidings. To bless means to say a blessing. To thank Hashem. The person who has been using this the last 2-3 years with and who's making it very popular and is popularizing it is Rabbi Arush. That he talks about this all the time now, and he gives stories upon stories of people who were saved from all kinds of terrible situations, all kinds of illnesses that disappeared, all kinds of things that were worked out. He was here in Yerushalayim.
Is that Chuta?
Yeah, Chut Shel Chesed. Even though Chut Shel Chesed, as we'll see, well, we didn't see, maybe we'll see it later again, Chut Shel Chesed actually bitachon. But this principle that he took from here, from this idea, that even in a state where it's not clear to you what is going on, we should still thank Hashem. And again, in the Talmud, this story is told as an illustration of the obligation that in this world we have to thank Hashem. This world means our reality in exile. That in this world, you have to thank Hashem for both the good and the bad. The fact that you thank Hashem for the good, hopefully that's natural to everybody. How many times every day do you say thank you to Hashem? Probably 100,000, right? But those don't usually include the times that something negative happens. But the halacha is that even if something negative happens, you have to say thank you to Hashem. You have to make a blessing, both dayana emet. So people only make this blessing for some reason when somebody passes away. But really, to give thanks is all the time, even for negative things. And that's what it means to have faith in a time of upheaval. It's an act that you do. It's not something passive. And the moment that it turns into something active, every action has a reaction. Something happens. But it's still exile. It's not like you're going to wake up in the morning and wow, the world was just redeemed. The world isn't redeemed, as we'll see from the story. The world stays the same. But you encounter something else. But something else happens to you, for you. Because the state of exile is a state in which there's an inability for one person's actions to truly affect everybody. So it's a state of being separate. So even though things might turn out well for me, they don't necessarily turn out well for somebody else. Because my faith is not strong enough to tip the balance for somebody else, unless I can show them my faith and they catch on to it and they accept it and they take it for themselves and so on. So what's the story? We learned in the Mishnah, one is obligated to recite a blessing for the bad that befalls him, just as he recites a blessing for the good that befalls him. The Gemara asks, what does it mean one is obligated to recite a blessing for the bad, just as for the good? If we say this means that just as one recites a blessing for a positive event with the formula, who is good and does good, so too one recites a blessing for a calamity with the formula, who is good and does good. If it's just to say a blessing the same way that you say Atov Amitiv, that he's good and he does good, just to say Atov Amitiv, same blessing, Baruch Atah Hashem Atov Amitiv. So we didn't do anything. So says the Gemara, really, who is good and does good? In our Mishnah, that over good tidings one recites who is good and does good, while over bad tidings one recites bless the true judge. Rather, so it's not just to change the blessing, that's not enough. Rather, Rabbah said the Mishnah statement was necessary to instruct us to accept bad tidings with the same joy. It says, to tell me that I need to say a blessing, this I would have learned anyway. But the chiddush was, the reason the Mishnah even mentioned it, was because it wanted to teach me that I also have to accept it with the same joy with which we accept good tidings. Not to instruct with regard to which blessing to recite. This I would have learned anyway. So that's what I needed the Mishnah for. It's amazing. First of all, most people don't remember this. Most people remember that you're supposed to say a blessing over the negative as you say about the positive. But Rava's solution to the Mishnah is that why did the Mishnah even mention this in the first place? I could have learned this just from the fact that he's always a tov v'amitiv, he's always good that does good. So obviously that's not relevant when something negative happens, so I would just say he's the good who does justice. So I would have come up with the alternate blessing anyway. So why did the Mishnah even mention this, that I need to say a blessing over the negative? Because it wanted to tell me that I have to have the same joy. So that's very hard, right? Maybe impossible. So to give us an example of what it means, so the Gemara gives an example. It says, when you say joy, you don't necessarily have to mean, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that the person is bubbling over with joy. Because joy can be many things. So to get into joy, we're not going to get into joy now. Why it has a lot of meanings. We're just going to see the story and see what happened when Rabbi Akiva accepted it, not with joy as we'll see, but call it the suspension of my call it the suspension. I have to believe enough that I suspend the way I think things are going to turn out. To have joy is to suspend my picture of the future. Okay? What drives me into sadness and into being morose and all, and to being depressed is because da'aga is because to have worries is because I have a certain picture of the future. Meaning that I have a certain, in my mind, I have a certain cause and effect sequence that I believe that from what I have right now, certain events are going to lead to such and such a state. I believe that I know how that works. So that I have to get rid of. If you remember, this is what we started with many weeks ago. That's to get rid of my machinations. All those thoughts in my head that drive me insane, that given that this is a situation now, it certainly is not going to turn out very well, that I have to get rid of. That's what it means, joy, in this case. There's a lot more to say about joy. But joy is a state in which you can give birth to something new. Most of the time we're giving birth to what we would call to, I don't want to use the translation of the Hebrew term. And in Hebrew it's to nefalim. To nefalim. Nefel. Nefel is we miscarry most of the time. You understand that what happens in the physical body also happens in the spirit, in the psyche.
Sounds so negative.
It is, it's very negative. That most of the time when we imagine the future, we're not able to give birth to something new because we think that the future is a continuation of the past. Why? Again, because we're superstitious. What do we believe? We believe nature. We don't believe Hashem.
What if a missed opportunity?
What?
Missed opportunity, maybe.
What do you mean? What's a missed opportunity?
Instead of saying a missed opportunity to
give birth.
To do it differently, yeah, exactly.
To give birth to something new.
Right.
So if it's a silent birth, it's like that. It wasn't viable what I was thinking about. I'm not able to suspend my again superstition that the world has to act the way that I think it has to act, as if I know how it really acts. I don't really know, but because I need this, call it fake confidence, fake security, so I latch onto whatever cause and effect I can figure out. But I have to suspend that. I have to be able, that's the belief, that's what it means to bask in the shadow of faith. That I'm not in the state yet where I can define what's going to come out. This is not confidence. In confidence, I have a picture of what's going to come out, and that's what's going to come out. That Hashem is going to do what I think needs to come out. Here, it's a state of at least suspend your disbelief about the future. Suspend what you think you know has to come out. Suspend that. Give Hashem the benefit of the doubt that He's still running the world, and it doesn't have to turn out the way you think it has to turn out. So that's what Rabbi Akiva taught. Like the incident, this is an example. To give an example, what does it mean to accept the bad with joy? So again, if you say there's something joy, you have to jump up and down out of joy. No, I don't know if anybody can do that.
How about Yosef?
Who?
That's what Yosef did.
He jumped up and down for joy?
He certainly was joyful in his difficult situation.
Which one? What are you referring
Yosef
to?
Hatzaddik.
Yeah, but when are you referring that he was joyful?
His whole time in Egypt, his time in prison.
Again, so we said he wasn't depressed. But to say that he was maybe he
Didn't
was.
he ask him? Didn't he ask them why are you sad?
מדוע ראיתם פניכם?
That
כן.
means what condition was he in? Not
That
sad.
he was able to see that other people were in a worse state than they were when he wasn't completely focused on himself. That's how I usually explain it. Maybe somebody says more than that. But for us, what this means is maybe we can't reach that state, but at least to suspend my determinism, my feeling that things have to come out in a certain
It
way.
seems
Is it
that's
like
what
we at some point we recognize, not just recognize, but completely accept that we're totally not in control, and we're giving control to Hashem over everything?
Okay. And that would be the meaning of exile. Exile is not to say that things have to come out bad. What it's saying is you don't know yet how to use confidence. So use faith. Again, I said before that people imagine that what kept us alive in exile and what keeps us alive right now is still that we have faith. But that would make you passive in a certain sense. That faith is just, you should somehow stay alive and not lose your faith that you're Jewish and that there's Torah and that there's a good future ahead and so on and so on. Here what he's saying is no, exile is an exercise in faith. And faith is an active force. And it's against superstition. And the biggest superstition you have in your head is your Yetzer Hara, is your evil inclination that wants you to believe that the next moment is going to be bad. That's the biggest superstition that you have. Out of all the superstitions. By the way, all the superstitions were exactly the same. Exactly. You follow it, it's to a note. They tell you, if you don't do this, it's going to be really bad. They all work the same way. That's how you recognize them. And something that's not superstition, that's faith, starts from the opposite point, which is, of course, Hashem is good and the world is good. To reveal that good, we have to do certain things. We have to have faith. We have to suspend our disbelief. We have to do a lot of things. But the world is good in its nature. There's nothing ahead that's terrible. On the contrary. So faith is the force that cleanses also the consciousness from these superstitions. And the greater the person, the bigger challenges he faces, in which he has to use this faith to meet them. And the great people that were alive over the generations, they faced the worst situations. And there was a test of faith. What was the test? Whether you hold on to the world is a good place or not. That it's not necessarily what I think it is. And everything in the world wants, that's what Reb Usher meant, that the Yetzer Hara is coming to attack me right now. It wants me to believe that I'm sick. It wants me to believe that I'm in jeopardy, that I'm this, that I'm that. It's not true. It's just a test. And all the doctors tell me that if you don't take care of, again, it depends on your level. There's a person who, he doesn't have faith that big. So if he has a heart attack, he has to run to the hospital. And he does what everybody says to do. Said it. That's his level. But there's always one or two or three people in every generation that they fight this. They say no, that's superstition. For them, it's superstition. To believe in the doctor, for them, is superstitious. This is only Hashem. It's not for everybody. But if that's your level, then even medicine becomes a superstition. But that's the general principle. The particular principle is different for each person. For that, every person has to know where they're standing, where they are. But Hashem usually doesn't give you, and that's what they mean by, Hashem doesn't give you a test you can't stand through, meaning that the tests that we have, the question is not whether we're going to get through them or not, because we're going to get through them anyway. Time moves on. You get through it. You liked it, you didn't like it, you were dragged through it, you went through it, you ran through it, you were pulled by your nose. It doesn't matter. You're going to get to the other side, whatever the other side looks like. The question of faith is, how are you going to imagine the day after? What is the day after going to look like for you while you're going through it? So let's read the story finally. The incident when Rabbi Akiva was walking along the road and came to a certain city. This is in the time of the Roman occupation of Eretz Yisrael. And he was in Eretz Yisrael. He was in the land of Israel. He inquired about lodging. They did not give him any. He said everything that God does, he does for the best. Because what is the usual outcome of somebody being left outside in the time of the Romans occupying Eretz Yisrael? What was the usual outcome?
You're gonna get bored.
Yeah, either the least is that he's going to be mugged, yeah, and the most is that he's going to be killed by the Romans. But he can't be outside at night. They were very, very afraid. In that time, this all has to do with the Gemaras that we're learning now in Daf Yomi. In that time, the people were afraid to be outside of a place of dwelling at night. People didn't walk streets or fields or whatever in the middle of the night. It was very dangerous. So what did he have with him? So he said, no, everything that God does is for the best. I don't understand how this is working. I don't know why this is good. But I believe that it is. Because everything that God does, He does it for the good, for the best. He went and slept in a field, and he had with him a rooster, a donkey, and a candle. And a gust of wind came and extinguished the candle. A cat came and ate the rooster, and a lion came and ate the donkey. So what does that mean? A certain death again. Now I don't have a candle, I don't have a rooster, and I don't have the donkey. So even if I survive the night somehow, how am I going to get out of here? But he still said, everything that God does, He does for the best. This is faith again. This is joy in faith. That night, an army came, meaning a legion came. Really, the word is legion in Hebrew. He came and took the city into captivity. So they ransacked that city, whatever it was, that he had tried to be in for the night, and they didn't let him in. And it turned out that Rabbi Akiva alone was not in the city and had no lit candle, no noisy rooster, or a donkey to give away his location, was saved. And everybody else, what happened to them? They were taken as slaves by the Romans and sold in Rome. So he was saved from it. So he said to them, who did he say this to? To his students. Didn't I tell you everything that God does, He does for the best?
I'm sorry, were his students with him then?
No, he told them, he repeated it later. There's a little piece here missing. Between that it's with the same joy and the incident that's related. There's a little piece missing. I didn't copy it. So he says that's what it means. So what did it mean? It meant not only that he make a blessing, but he said it's for the best. He's doing it for the good. So that's joy, because what is he saying? That the outcome is not necessarily going to be the negative outcome that my mind tells me that it's going to be. So it's to get over my initial inclination, my superstition, that out of bad only comes bad. Because that's the main thing. So I said that Rav Arush takes this today, and he just says, whatever negative thing happens to you, begin thanking Hashem for it. Because it must be for the best in the world. And surprisingly, or not, depends on who hears it, things have a way of suddenly leading to something very good. That's what it means to have, that's what it means to bask in the shadow of faith. So let's just read the explanation here. Rabbi Akiva does not understand, this is already from Rav Ginsburg. Rabbi Akiva does not understand the manner in which God's providence works, but believes with complete and perfect faith that the Almighty meant well, and awaits God's salvation from afar. What does it mean from afar? Meaning from a state of self-nullification. Now we're going to prove this in a second. But that Hashem saving me comes from afar doesn't mean, you would think maybe it means, that the salvation is far away. But it's not. When it says that salvation is far, because Yeshuat Hashem Krova, because always the salvation of Hashem is very close. So why do we say that it's from afar? Because it's close, but for me it's from afar. I have to see far away. Because what's close to me right now is to see that negative is going to come out of the negative. That's how I see things. So I have to distance myself from myself. And that means to see from afar. What are the verses? That afar symbolizes wisdom. And this is from this week's Parsha, and it's actually from
Today.
tomorrow. Tomorrow's Chitat. No, today's. You're right. We read it this morning. I don't remember what I read this morning. It ends with him going to being called Moshe. The Chitat ends today with him being called Moshe by Bat Paro. But before that, it says that Miriam
In Hebrew, afar, is it
Mirachok.
is using the words in Hebrew
Okay.
to describe it? Or-
And what does it say? This is a famous teaching from the Baal Shem Tov. For some reason, it wasn't brought here. And his sister Miriam stood from afar. Why does it have to tell us? And his sister stood from afar, awaiting to see how God would save her baby brother Moses, placed in the small wheat basket on the Nile. Okay. And wisdom is referred to as one sister. In the verse, say to wisdom, you are my sister. And Mo lechochma achotiyat, a pasuk from Mishlei. And the Baal Shem Tov made a big deal about this. He said that if you want to see Hashem's salvation, you have to have chokhmah, because it comes. The Yeshua comes from afar, from somewhere far away. Eitzot merachok emunah omen. It all comes from afar. And if you want to reach the state of being afar, being rachok, you have to engage in your wisdom. You have to use your wisdom. Your wisdom is your sister. That's what it's called. Like Miriam stood from afar to see what would happen. What happened to him? He was what? Saved. From afar. How far? Could you imagine something more distant than that Moshe would be taken in by Pharaoh's daughter? But that's a state of exile. That's how it works. That his mother and father gave up on him. Right? The father said to Miriam, said to the sister, you're ostracized for a week. Because you spoke like you had prophecy, and it was a false prophecy. He's not going to be saved. And she wanted to see what would happen to him. So she still had faith. But she said, because what would a normal person say? So, I was wrong. But she didn't. So she gave birth by willing to suspend her disbelief. She gave birth to Pharaoh's daughter. Without her standing from afar, that's what he's saying. That's what the Baal Shem Tov.
Wisdom, though, that's the only connection.
Because bittul, because wisdom is bittul.
Okay.
It's self-nullification.
Okay.
I'm nullifying my predetermined end, the way I think things are going to work out. I have to. That's what faith means here. So again, to get rid of my machinations, to get rid of all my cheshbonos. If I can get rid of all my cheshbonos, I can give birth to something new. If I can't stand from afar, why does she stand from afar? She's going to stand right next to it. Because standing from afar, the Torah is telling me, is a hint that to really let something new happen, you have to distance yourself from what you think is going to be the outcome. You have to you have to nullify that picture in your head. And once you nullify, because Chokhmah and Bina work together, you also become filled with joy. Remember this, but when we learned chapter 33 in the Tanya, he said, why do you do this whole meditation of there's only Hashem? To have what? He had 2 words. And these 2 words are like the definition of that chapter, Simchat HaNefesh. He said it's in order to have the joy of the soul, it's to return the joy to you. That if you're able to nullify all the machinations, all the different negative thoughts that you have, and there's only Hashem, suddenly you're filled with joy. Because you create an empty space, that's the bittul, and the result is Bat Paro. That suddenly she appears out of nowhere. So she herself, she's joy. She's a tremendous ending to something that you thought would end differently. And there's probably a lot of gematria that I don't know about Bat Paro. What was her name?
That's not.
What does that mean? The daughter of Yudke. She came out of this Chochmah and Bina together. Yudke are Chochmah and Bina. So she's the result of that.
It's like you're remembering.
No, it's just thinking out loud. So to be in a state of exile is not hopeless. It's not that you have nothing to do. You just have to somehow say after the fact, okay, everything is for the good. No. It's what the story is trying to say about Rabbi Akiva and what the story is trying to say about Miriam is that they created the positive end by suspending their disbelief.
Miriam is not confidence.
Miriam?
Wouldn't be confidence.
Here is she standing afar. It could be that maybe she's other things also. Yeah, could be she's other things also. But here the point is, again, the Baal Shem Tov dwells on this word. Why does she have to stand merachok? So he says, because of the other verses, it does a Gzera Shava, it's called. It's like the same word appears in two verses. So here it says, Vateitatza v'choto merachok, his sister stood from afar. And in Mishlei it says, Emor lachochma chotiyat, that the sister is your wisdom. So wisdom is afar. So he says that's what she did. She had to exercise her wisdom. In the end, he says it even more than that, but not for now. But, okay? So wisdom that emanates from the Almighty is said to appear from afar. From afar, Havaya appeared to me. Havaya here is the Yudke. Havaya here is the Hashem as the lover, the one who does good to you. So if you want to see it happen, you have to suspend your own. It's almost like the psyche wants to push in that direction that things are going to be terrible, because that's what the superstitions do to us. So that's Rabbi Akiva, and that's a state of basking in Hashem's faith. And so another example of that Tzila de Meimnuta in the shadow of faith is what we do in Sukkos. What do we do in Sukkot? We sit in the shadow of faith. We do something that's not normal. You go out of your house, and you say that you go into exile. Basically, Sukkot is starting the year with a state of exile. And the state of exile allows a new year to be forged. You sit outside your house, like I'm in exile, and I'm completely at the mercy of the elements. No machinations. I can't help anything. It'll be what it is. And Sukkot is all about the future. It says it's the future holiday also. It's the one holiday that all the nations of the world will keep. It's the future holiday. It's always about the future, Sukkot. Because they're setting up the future the next year. What about confidence? He says no. So first of all, what was Rabbi Akiva? How did he finish his life?
Murdered.
He was tortured and killed by the Romans. He was one of the 10 martyrs. So we talked about this. What?
He was smiling.
He had joy. He was still in joy. We can't understand because for him, this didn't mean anything what they were doing to him. I told you the story from Chana Rachel Schusterman about how she became frum. That she came here to Eretz Yisrael sometime in the 70s, and she went to Yad Vashem and she saw a picture. You heard this? Remember this? I've told it a number of times because it stuck to me very strongly. This story. She saw a picture of a family about to be gunned down in front of the pits, and she says that. I've never seen a picture like this, but she saw it. She says, I saw in their eyes that they were looking through the Nazis. Just through them, like they don't exist. And it haunted her. How could somebody see through certain death? What are they looking at? It's like you don't exist. It wasn't even rebellion, she said. It was like you're thin air. You don't count. That's what Rabbi Akiva saw. Apparently, he sees from afar. From afar, Hashem appears to me. So, it's that's faith that's active. It's not just to accept things after the fact. It's that this very thing, it changes the course of history. So what did it change? It changed at least Chanarachel Schusterman, and what else it did. But apparently that faith that they had, it has tremendous power to change things. So that's all a state of exile. And it says that the reason that we mention the 10 martyrs right after the Avoda on Yom Kippur, the order of the service in the temple. So some people say it's to awaken Hashem's mercy, but we don't need to awaken Hashem's mercy on Yom Kippur. Hashem promises that all the sins are eradicated on Yom Kippur. If you fast, that's it. So, what do we need it for? So, the other explanation of Shabbat and Chassidus is because we just described the temple and what it was like, and we say, Ashrei Ayin Sherat Azot, it was good for those who saw it, and it was a different type of existence, and so on and so forth. And now we're suddenly in a state of exile. So, to know how to survive exile, you have to hear the story of the 10 martyrs. That they set up, including this story, of how you survive in exile. And it's not just to survive in the sense of not to give up. It's to survive in the sense of being able to create something even though you don't have confidence. But faith itself has the ability to create something. So we'll stop here because you're supposed to get 5 minutes off. Right?